This seminar about beginning demise and the unborn goes to be a dialogue of the Buddhist philosophy of trade, and I am going to start off by means of going into the very complicated and hard question of the Buddhist view of birth and loss of life, and the doctrine which is primarily understood as reincarnation or rebirth. It's a curious factor that many Westerners who emerge as interested by Hinduism or Buddhism do so because of this idea of reincarnation. They adore it. It offers a more satisfactory vision of individual records and development than the two opportunities that would commonly be open to Westerners to agree within. On the only hand, you have got the selection of the Christian view, that's that you stay in this global, as soon as and on this 80 years and 10, your eternal fate is settled, or you have the opportunity of the materialistic view, that is which you handiest live once, and whilst you're useless, it is which you're a flash of attention between everlasting darknesses. Clever human beings in the Western International have by no means felt very glad about either of these potentialities, and consequently there's a certain attractiveness about the idea which seems to be the factor of Buddhism and Hinduism, that you're a soul on a pilgrimage, and that from a few extraordinarily difficult to understand starting place, you started out as a few sort of animal and worked your way up grade by grade via all types of styles of lifestyles, and subsequently you've got the privilege of appearing in human shape, and as soon as you have got there, you have got an opportunity to increase to the best religious position. You should keep in mind that according to both Hindu and Buddhist doctrines, the human shape is a completely privileged role, for there are, according to each of them, due to the fact they percentage a not unusual cosmology, 6 domain names of beings, and in case you visualize the wheel of lifestyles with its 6 divisions at the highest top department, there's the realm of the Dadava, is a phrase from which we get the phrase divine, and similarly the word Satan. Adava means, although in the beginning a god or greater, effectively an angel, is a higher Western translation of DVA than God. Straight away contrary, the Dava global at the bottom of the circle, there may be the Naraka global of beings in torment of the absolute that is the dimension of the sector, that's the screaming mimes which is in joy within the shape of horror. The Da world is the revel in of being inside the form of bliss, and among those poles there are all varieties of stages. There are, as an example, the Asuras next to the Devis going clockwise across the wheel, and the Asuras are they are a wrathful beings. Asher is the incarnation of divine anger. Then subsequent to the Asher going around are the animals, all animals in any respect. Alternatively, we get to the Naraka at the bottom, the region of purgatory, we'll name it. Then coming up once more, there's the sector of the Pa, who are frustrated beings, and they are represented iconographically as having very large bellies and really tiny mouths. This is to say, an enormous appetite with very little approach of pleasant it. They may be a type of non-secular bottleneck. And then developing among the Prayas and the Davas is the sector of the human beings, and that is understood to represent a sort of center role. You can be liberated from the human kingdom. Due to the fact the Devis are too satisfied to be liberated, the Asuras too livid, the animals too dumb, the Narak too tormented, and the Praya too annoyed. You need not take this as a literal account of numerous sorts of being in the universe. You may take them really as an outline of numerous states of the human thoughts, of the moods you could undergo. They are all simply to your very own head, as we shall see later on about many different things. But those are the 6 worlds of Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. And the belief is that one reincarnates again and again through the 6 worlds. That is the famous idea in different words. If you stay this human existence in a bad way, and you turn out to be irritated, if you devote your life to fury, you will be reincarnated as an air of secrecy. In case you commit your life to simply living for lower back and stomach, you'll be reincarnated as an animal. If you are horribly cruel to people, and so on, you'll be reincarnated as a Naraka, and so on all round. However, on the other hand, in case you do suitable matters inside the direction of your karma, you'll be reincarnated within the Da world, or in better and higher conditions within the human world. That is the popular knowledge, and Westerners many of them suppose properly. It's great due to the fact this opens up extensive vistas of destiny improvement. We will move on in future lives working out our destinies. And we can also like to reflect on consideration on who we had been earlier than whilst you fall in love with somebody, did you meet before in a few past life. Is this the operating out of a karma? This is between you, and it's very thrilling. However, the humorous factor is that Hindus and Buddhists who do trust in rebirth do so no longer because they like it, but because they experience they must accept it as a hard fact. And the complete challenge of the work of a sadhana or non-secular exercise and field is to get out of it. So it usually strikes me it is very funny that Westerners take this up due to the fact they locate it comforting. However, Easterners are constantly seeking to get away from being reborn. It changed into so humorous. Once Joseph Campbell instructed me a story that he became sitting with a Vanta Swami, this kind of Vanta society Swamis, and the Swami became saying, "Oh, expensive me." He said, "You understand without a doubt, the idea of rebirth is so great." Said I surely I assume that is the maximum comforting belief. And Joe stated to him, "Swami, do not be a rattling fool. What are you speak me approximately, the concept of rebirth being so comforting, don't you realize that it's what you're alleged to get away from?" And the Swami abruptly jumped and said, "Oh yes, of direction." It turned into like I once had a communicate with a Swami and he become arguing. You notice that at the back of all the multiple paperwork of this world, there was handiest a single divine principle, and he became taking place approximately. This I said, "Swami, you can't communicate like that. You recognize thoroughly that the Brahman, the remaining reality, isn't always one, because one has an contrary that is many, and Brahman has no opposite. You should speak as Brahman as the non-dual." And once more he stated, "You speak simply like a laughter Hindu. They may be fun, you note, because these Swamis have universal and vast amount of Western feeling, and the British were chargeable for that, for occupying India so long and perverting its traditions. Now it's so curious all this, due to the fact in Buddhism there still prevails a concept of rebirth, very robust amongst all Buddhist nations, but Buddhism explicitly denies that there's any man or woman reincarnating soul. You see, in Buddhism there's a doctrine that is known as the 3 signs and symptoms of being. And these 3 symptoms of being, well, I have to more efficaciously say the Sanskrit phrase is bhava. Bhava, and meaning becoming instead of being bhava, is from the fundamental root, I think, bh, that's linked with boom. So bhava, turning into the system of alternate, has 3 signs. One is referred to as dukkha, dukkha in Sanskrit means frustration, on occasion translated struggling, but I suppose frustration is a extra preferred phrase, that is, perhaps better it is dukkha is the opposite of sukha, approach, candy. Dukkha perhaps means sour, but on this within the manner it is used, it approach frustration as a simple characteristic of residing beings, because for a few purpose or different the life is usually in the end irritating. You have choice more than you can ever get. You overreach the opportunities, and so as to each being death comes as a crumble, and as something unfortunate. The subsequent signal of being is referred to as anitiya in Sanskrit, anita, because of this impermanence, the other word being nita, eternal. So anita is the whole lot, is in flux, and subsequently anatman, anatman, which means that nothing has its very own soul. Now it is sounds to a Christian a horrible concept, due to the fact we use the word soulless. Or we are saying to a person, you've got no soul. This means that you have no finer emotions. You are now not a human being, due to the fact Christian theology did distinguish between people and animals by means of saying that animals don't have any soul. Idiots don't have any soul. They have lost their soul. However, you may see at once that there is a complete difference of the which means this is to translate Atman as soul is ridiculous. Anatman means essentially that not anything exists properly. There is any other phrase in Sanskrit. You need to know sva, which means oneself, or one's very own, identical as the Latin sus, because the V becomes the yuva bhava, turning into once more your personal becoming, or sometimes it's called your very own nature or self-nature. And so what it is announcing is that that not anything has any actual swabhava, due to the fact no individual aspect of any kind exists besides in relation to all of the different things. In different words, you're what you are best because of your relationships to the entirety else, and therefore the entire universe is a machine of interdependence. It is just as if, as an example, you had been to stand sticks at the ground, and lean them in opposition to every different, and they will stand up and shape an inverted V, because they lean on every other, and this is an antique issue that they teach kids in Japan, that those sticks leaning in opposition to each different form, the Chinese person or guy, and they say consequently, man cannot exist until we assist every other. This is the basis, consequently, of brotherhood and of exact social relationships. However, beneath this is the some distance more profound idea that the universe coheres by means of everything depending on the whole lot. Else, and consequently, not anything exists by myself, not anything exists in its very own proper, and that is what Anatman approach you do now, not have an indestructible immortal soul, which is simply plain you all the time and ever, and is unbiased of there being something else in any respect. Also, though this does go along with the idea that there isn't a few sort of gaseous spook, a few type of etheric double astral frame, what have you which outlasts the existence of the physical frame and migrates to the following incarnation, so it has continually been a puzzle for Buddhist philosophers to provide an explanation for how they could at once consider in reincarnation, and at the equal time deny the lifestyles of in-person spook, that is impartial of the bodily body, and the most diffused discussions in all Buddhist literature range round this puzzle. The most essential text of early Buddhism is a ebook referred to as the Questions of King Milinda. This is the Greek Menandanda. He's a king in the succession of Alexander the Brilliant, who ruled in Alexander's Jap Empire, and had long conversations with a Buddhist sage by using the name of Nagisna, and Nagisna attempts to explain to the king how there may be rebirth without anyone who is being reborn. And so this is the hassle to which we cope with ourselves. How can there be a persevering with process without something carried alongside with the aid of it? And you may understand straight away that the trouble could be very largely semantic due to the fact it involves our whole concept of continuity. What, for example, do you imply by way of a wave, whilst you throw a stone into the water, and from the plop factor in which the stone is going in a whole lot of rings emerge, and they are waves, and that they exit, and you may, as it have been, examine one of them and observe it. And also you say, I'm watching a wave. However, what's a wave? You know thoroughly that the water itself, no quantity of water, no particular extent of water, is moving outwards from the location in which you drop pebble it. The water is staying quite nonetheless to date, as lateral movement is worried, but the water is transferring up and down, and those up and down moves create the illusion of an element referred to as a wave that goes alongside, much like the phantasm when you watch a barber's pole revolving. It seems to be a procession of something that keeps going up from the bottom of the pole to the top, but actually it is simply going around now, that look of something shifting, whilst there may be virtually the simplest aspect that is going outwards, is motion, and motion is about as abstract as you can think. This is the entire root of the Indian concept of Maya, of the sector, as Maya as a construct, as something which, shall we say, exists most effective in your thoughts best. We shall ought to be very cautious of what we suggest by that, and I'm going to come back to that afterward in the seminar. So here is the factor: you are delivered from rebirth, this being the motive of the spiritual disciplines of Hinduism and Buddhism. As quickly as you're relieved of the illusion that something is going on, continuity, this after this, all linking up collectively into a chain in the well-known Zen text known as the Platform Sutra, attributed to Huang the Sixth Patriarch, there is a passage which says if we permit our thoughts beyond gift and future to hyperlink up into a series, we put ourselves under restraint. However, at the different hand, if we simply see that they are not they, there may be simply this concept, after which this concept, and then this idea you're liberated. That is an concept that's taken up with the aid of T.S. Eliot in his poem, The Four Quartets, where you return to the passage wherein he says, which you're getting on a train, and you've settled down inside the compartment with your newspaper, and you are going on a journey, but the only who arrives on the destination will now not be the same individual who left the platform in the beginning, due to the fact you who sit down right here now are not similar. The folks that got here in at the door a little whilst ago, just in exactly the same way as the flame of a candle appears to be a regular flame which we can identify as a component. but as a depend of fact, it is a movement of warm strength, which is whatever debris anything gaseous molecules are here are going like this the whole time, flowing upwards and disappearing. The confl, the flame, is converting the candle wax into gasoline, and in exactly the identical manner as we are able to see that the flame has an identity. You are saying it's miles a flame, we have a noun for it, where certainly it is a manner, it's far flaming, and so in this, in just precisely that way, every man or woman is a method, just because the flame is the conversion of wax into gasoline. So you and that I are the conversion of air and water and light and pork steak and milk into, and which once more converts into something else. You spot we are the flowing vibration via which all this goes, and now not for 1 second. Are we the identical? So then, the which means of the Buddhist doctrine is that you who stay today are never going to die, due to the fact the only it's going to die will now not be the you is here now, and likewise the one that is here now changed into in no way born. It is going like this. It is defined by Dogen, who became a most fabulous Zen philosopher dwelling around 1200 advert, while he said the spring does now not end up the summer time, and the summer season does now not end up the autumn. No one could say that spring becomes the summer time. There may be spring, and then there's summer, and he stated inside the same manner, while you burn wooden, there are ashes. However, the wooden does no longer grow to be the ashes. There's wooden, and then there is ashes. Every is because it have been enough to itself. There are because it have been so steps. It is like vibrations, a wave crests, you see, wherein the water would not circulate. You notice the water does not move laterally. So in this sense, with the aid of analogy, the spring does no longer emerge as the summer. However, by means of looking at you, for your thoughts impose motion at the up and down of the water, and so that you say the spring becomes the summertime, so likewise you are saying the baby turns into the adolescent, turns into the guy, becomes the crone, turns into the corpse. And the Buddhists say no, these states follow inside the identical manner as the plain movement of a wave, and so the phrase to the wise is live the instant you're in. There is no other location to be. You'll no longer die. And also you were in no way born. If you realize, if you see through the phantasm, now this could sound as if one have been creating a theory of the universe that is what you would possibly call atomistic, discontinuous, it's miles, saying the universe is nothing but factor example, and all of it comes all the way down to which you see that is an extension of the Western philosophy of nominalism. Nominalism is against realism. The nominalists argue in opposition to the realists' point of view. That's realists say there is this type of factor as mankind. Mankind is a fact, and every character human is a special example of a real everyday substance referred to as Guy. The nominalists argue that is abstraction and nonsense. There may be no such aspect as mankind. There are handiest individual human beings, and of path this has grown to be inside the 20th century. The ascendant factor of view, there isn't sincerely one of these things as America of the USA that could be a political abstraction. There are simply those who stay right here, but if you take nominalism to its logical conclusion, you get to the factor wherein you do not exist in any respect, a individual. Well, there's no such aspect as a human being. It's an abstraction. All there may be is the molecules, which can be the cells which infest your bones and dissolve those further into the nuclear debris. And you may say nicely, this is all there is. You see, there are simply these items. However, then you suddenly begin to recognize there is no end to that way of wondering, due to the fact you can always, given creativeness and given unit of sufficient subtlety, subdivide any unit of life, of movement, of energy into further subdivisions, further devices of dimension, and say, well, that we get extra actual as we get smaller. You notice it is without a doubt saying that the smaller things are the more actual things. Nicely, it is a ridiculous argument because you can play it precisely within the contrary course. You could say, oh, no, 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 because all small matters best exist surprisingly, this is to say in relation to each other. The most effective real issue is the big thing, so all those small debris are pretty unreal. The best element that is actual is the whole universe, and that's so big that no one can conceive it. So do you spot all philosophical argument is a sport playing with human beings, arguing with each Other in phrases gambling up and down the scale of arguing as to which stage of bits, collections of bits or bits, whatsoever, which one is actual. I've noticed a totally funny aspect in observing with my experiments with psychedelics that psychedelic conversations are definitely best examples of what is going on and usually has been going on in philosophy. Human beings start speaking with each different, having very lively conversations about nothing at all except the techniques of grammar in different words. Let's say a communication in which not anything precise is cited, no right names are used, no proper nouns, nothing is being referred to in any way, but all the words that indicate more or much less dimensions of first-class dimensions of amount, all of the operative words, say words like to be, to grow, to decrease, to enlarge, to agreement, all these are operant phrases, which may be used with regards to all kinds of specifics, but they get into conversations wherein all specifics are dropped out, and only operant phrases are used, and that they dance with every different with the aid of the usage of these forms of words, and philosophers are doing precisely the equal factor of philosophy is an intellectual dance of a game that we play similar to it might be pass, or it is probably chess or checkers or poker, in which we take those abstractions, the set of cards 52 to the deck, and we play numbers and orders against each different philosophers, just the equal issue in all their arguments, and you say, properly, isn't that sort of stupid? Properly, maybe it isn't always due to the fact existence itself. Biology is the equal factor. We have most of these species that devour every different and come on in distinctive shapes, in distinctive forms, and so forth, and there may be a competition going on all the time to prove whether or not the cats are extra powerful than the mice or the people, than the rats, and that this regular thing is going on. However, it is the same type of bubble handy. It takes in place of this sort of easy word as bubble, which is a vibration in the air. It comes on as a mouse, and a mouse is a very complex way of pronouncing laughter bubble, and so in all this you see while you get a game going of this type, there comes the point of what you may name emotional funding when you experience that the final results of this precise function in sport is urgent. See this topics, and also you spot that that's what we mean by using, remember the word count number, meaning something enormous, something fabric, additionally method vital at topics, and it's up to you what you observe topics. We train our youngsters what matters, what is essential for them to research, and we teach them essentially that it is crucial to stay, you have to move on, it's terribly critical. While you get a schizophrenic toddler or a Mongolian, so known as Mongolian idiot, those youngsters don't recognize that it's vital to head on, and they do not give a rattling, and they're very happy, but from our point of view, incompetent, unadapted to society, vain, because they do not understand why it is important to head on dwelling. They are just going to have a ball, where they're, and usually what we'd say goof off, and in a manner. Each being in this international is torn among going on and goofing off. We experience it truly is that is the basis of our difference between paintings and play is everybody desires a while to goof off, but they need to move again to work due to the fact you've got to farm and fish and manufacture and bring stuff. You can move on, but while you see you have this terrifying urgency to go on and feel you need to, this is essential, this subjects